Welcome, everyone. Once again, my name is Felipe and here with the Charter for Compassion. We are super grateful to have you here on our Global Read webinar series of today. We are super excited to be hosting Pastor Don Mackenzie as one of the co-authors of the book Religion Gone Astray, where we found at the heart of interfaith. This book was written by, again, Pastor Don Mackenzie, Rabbi Ted Falcon, and Imam Jamal Rahman, who is also one of the participants on this conversation today. The conversation will be moderated by, again, Imam Jamal Rahman and Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan, which together with Pastor Don Mackenzie are the Interfaith Amigos. And we're so grateful to have you, all three of you here, talking about an incredible book, a great topic, and we love always your insights. So welcome once again. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to post them on the chat or in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer them at the end. And I want to remind you that this is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel, and you will receive a link of this presentation at the end once we upload this on our YouTube channel. So with that, the floor is yours, my Interfaith Amigos.
Thanks, Felipe.
Well, Don, may I ask you the first question?
Yeah, thank you.
Great. I am so excited to get you talking about this book because I love this book so much and I have read it 3 times, twice recently. So maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about what is the main theme of the book and how did it come to be?
Thanks, Laura. I think, yeah, I think that's at the heart of a lot of what we do. I think the main theme of the book is why isn't religion able to do more to help us with the polarities, the poverty, the exclusivity, the violence and so forth that we're experiencing in our world. And hence the title, Religion Gone Astray. The title really comes as a consequence of the title of our first book, which was Getting to the Heart of Interfaith, the eye-opening, hope-filled friendship of a rabbi, a pastor, and an imam. And so we felt that this title needed to be followed by what we found at the heart of interfaith, which was this really interesting and difficult problem of religion not being able to do what it claims it wants to do. And so I think that that was what got us going on it. And it may be, I would say, Jamal, you can chime in on this, of the 3 books we've written, maybe the most important for that reason.
Yes, because that is a major obstacle. And I was going to ask you, can you identify those areas where you feel religion goes astray that we have written about? And particularly, if I may ask you, to focus on and say a few words about this problem of holier than thou attitude, exclusivity.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think yes, we did identify some areas. Exclusivity was the big umbrella, which also includes inequality, racism, economic injustice. But violence, the inequality of men and women, and homophobia would be the other big categories. And I think that these all come under this umbrella of exclusivity. And why on earth should religions not be able to recognize these things and deal more effectively with them? I think that was where we were when we started writing this book. Is that right, Jamal? I think.
Yes, yes, yes. And can you say something about exclusivity in Christianity that bothers you?
Yeah, there's a lot that bothers me. Yeah. It's funny, the verse that has been one of the key players in the sense that Christianity should be understood to be superior and separate from other traditions, which is in the Gospel of John, and Jesus is reported to have said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to God except by me." Now, the Gospel of John was the last one written that's in the Bible. And I think that we have to understand that some of what's in the Bible is spiritual wisdom, and some of it is egocentrism, wish fulfillment, justification for evil things, conquest, and so forth, violence. And so in some ways, the Gospel of John is an attempt to justify the message of Jesus in relation to its perceived enemies at that time, namely Gnostics, Jews, and pagans. And so there's a lot of critical thinking that has to be applied to this particular book because it has an agenda that is not always consistent, I would say, I think we would say, with the teachings of Jesus.
Over to you, Sister Laura.
Well, Don, I want to go back to the little overview you just gave of the book and connect it with some of what's going on in the rhetoric and the activities in our time right now.
Good, yeah.
And it seems to me that the topics that you wrote about in the book, exclusivity, homophobia, patriarchy, that sense of arrogance that each tradition is the best one. It seems to me that with those things always present in religion and perhaps always divisive and not really dealt with effectively, it seems like all that was just waiting there for religions to become a tool of divisiveness. Can you say a little bit about what you see going on in that area? And then if you have thoughts about it, how to start working to heal that? I know
Yeah,
that's kind
great.
of a summary question.
Yeah, okay, Laura, thank you. I think in the United States, Christian nationalism is a best example of one of the consequences of what we would call the misuse of the authority of religion, which is rooted in ignorance, basically, about what these traditions are really about. There are problems with the same topic in the Middle East and other parts of the world. And in some ways, I think it's because we don't really know each other. We know each other in terms of the obvious, what we look like, what we sound like, what our affiliations are, and so forth. But underneath that is that what I call the vast uncharted territory of the soul, where our stories reside, where our beliefs reside, where our dreams and broken dreams, hopes and fears, the songs we sing, the dances we do, these are the things that make us interesting. And in fact, the things that could help us to connect to each other. And I think these are the places where spiritual wisdom really could help to connect us. But we don't look at that. And especially, well, we just don't look at it. Instead, we see people in terms of stereotypes and so forth, and which is tragic because we, as Ben Franklin said, we're here to help each other. We're not supposed to be here to be hurting each other and so forth, and yet we find excuses at almost every turn to do something that would hurt somebody and presumably have, as a consequence, increase our worth or our self-esteem and so forth, which is another tragedy. I think the other thing about where we are right now, though, is the speed of change, and the fact that between the internet and television, we can know just about everything that's going on in the world anywhere at any time. And so that's overwhelming, and I think pushes us further back into that need for certainty, which is an illusion, I think we would agree. And so, the need for spiritual reassurance, the need for heightened spiritual awareness about who we are and how we're connected, is as great as it's ever been because of these things, I think. And so, you know, the question that I have been asked before is, what is the opportunity in this problem? What is the opportunity in this problem? I think the opportunity is to find ways to make real the fact that we're all connected, that we all have equal value, that we're all interesting, and that we all do bad things in addition to good things. And so we could be helping each other.
Yes.
I mean, for me, having lived in the Middle East, the fact that these two peoples are hurting each other is tragic because they could be helping each other. And yet we don't quite know how to do that. And not that there aren't people on the ground who understand these things and are working together, Palestinians and Israelis, but it seems to be the crucible of how things are going in the world. So again, you know, I think the question we keep asking ourselves is, what is the opportunity in these problems?
So, Brother Don, it seems from what you're saying and the work we have all done, and this, of course, includes Sister Laura, that there's a critical need to get to know the other on a human level, to create the environment where this can really happen, no matter what the polarization. Of course, this is very difficult, but I love that wonderful saying that uh, this universe is made out of stories, not atoms.
Yeah.
How can we create that situation where truly, on a heart-to-heart level, we can connect? But what I wanted to say was, Brother Don, you also have emphasized a lot about playing music, singing and music. We through music we can create harmony. And in our presentations, you have consistently talked about that. How can we get together and sing and dance and create music that creates harmony among religions? Can you say something about that? And by the way, you and your band have played in Nashville.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jamal. I do think that singing together is one of the greatest incarnations of the reality of the oneness that we believe exists between and among us on this planet. And singing in harmony is even better in some ways because it shows how we can be different and still be together. Oneness is not sameness, in other words. It's not sameness. I mean, that would be boring for one thing, but it doesn't exist. Oneness is an inclusive connectedness that not only permits difference, but helps us to appreciate and give thanks for it. And in doing so, I think moves us to find ways to cooperate, which is what we need so badly. So I think music is just something that I think music and poetry, among other things, are the things that penetrate that floor above which is the ordinary of our lives, the visible, the usual, the egocentric stuff, which we have to have. We have to manage our lives, but music and poetry can push us below that to the place where we can actually experience, and sometimes in an almost visceral way, our connectedness. And that's why, in some ways, music will make you cry or laugh or both, you know. And so, I mean, I think that's why we sing or chant in our worship services, each of us, you know, and because it takes us to a different place. It helps to open our hearts, that container metaphor for love and compassion and the experience of oneness. And, you know, I'm not talking about a particular kind of music. I think almost any kind of music can do it if you're willing to let it happen. Yeah.
You know, if I may just make a quick comment here, you know, you remind me of this wonderful utterance by Rumi, the 13th century sage, who said, music is the sound of the spheres. And we have been a part of this harmony before. And so when there is song and music, it keeps our remembering fresh. So may we always engage in music and dance. Sister Laura.
Thank you.
Well, Don, I find that I want to ask a very practical kind of question. And maybe you alluded to this by saying that this book, Religion Gone Astray, um, is really a deeper look into what you found at the heart of interfaith, what
Right.
you and Jamal and Ted found there. So I'm thinking of the 5 stages of interfaith activity, interfaith journeying, interfaith relationship, the 5 stages of interfaith that you identified in that first book, right? And it starts with some stages that are meeting and greeting, and it ends with some stages that are really doing things collaboratively, spiritually, and like right there in the middle at that sort of apex, there's a difficult spot, right? And that is really, really talking about the difficult things. And it seems like this book is a leap into starting to look at some of those very difficult things, right? That are difficult in communities and difficult between communities. And they're very, very big. Do you have some practical suggestions for how people can meet and greet and begin to set the stage to actually deal with difficult things together? Even one example would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think that that is probably the key question, because where in on the planet can we go with that purpose? Can we go to a place with the purpose of meeting and finding out the story of someone we don't know, especially someone who's different, or at least perceived to be different? I mean, here in Minneapolis, as you know, racial justice is a big issue. I mean, injustice is a big issue, and lots of faith communities are working on it. But you know, the white churches are talking about racial justice among themselves. The churches of color doing the same. The Jewish communities. How do we get beyond ourselves to have the opportunity to get to know someone? And of course, you have to do this with some kind of predisposition of openness. I mean, I wish, for example, I wish, for example, that a white church could not worship once a month, and instead, by invitation in small groups, go to other churches, small churches. And it wouldn't have to be just churches of color, but just churches that are different, because we're all different in some ways. And how do you do that? And we'd have to do it over a period of time. And of course, after worship at what we call the fellowship hour, we might find ways to get to know each other. And I think that's what that hour is about. But beyond that, I mean, we need more than that. We need it more, desperately more than that. And so I think that it requires a deep yearning to open the heart to the lives of other people. I think it requires an opportunity to do that, and not necessarily terrifically guided, but still one where the purpose is clear. That is to say, the purpose grounded in the fact that we don't really know each other, except in terms of, as I said before, the visible, the stereotypes, and so forth. And as we've said before so many times, you and Jamal and I, in these, you know, in the getting to know each other stage, that first stage, we can't start with talking about our religious traditions. I mean, that's way down the road. I think what we say is, who are we as human beings? Hopes and dreams, all that stuff that's below, as I said, hopes and dreams, fears, stories. Who are we? You know, where have we been? Where are we going? And how do we deal with those, the big questions? Where do we come from? What are we supposed to be doing? And what happens to us when we die? Those are the things we don't think about, because we're so terrifically consumed by the activities of daily living. If otherwise we have enough food, clothing, and shelter and so forth, but if we don't, then even that mounts on top of that. So I think what's lacking in our world right now are places that are designed and welcoming to the idea that we need to get to know each other, not at the obvious level, but at what Jamal has so often called the human level. Who are we as people? And as I said before, these are the places where we're interesting. You know, these stories, these are interesting things, but we're blocked from those by just focusing on the obvious.
And also, if I may add, Brother Don, the three of us, meaning the four of us actually, me, you, and Ted, and Sister Laura, we talk continuously about the critical need to raise our consciousness. If we really have to overcome our polarization, go beyond our anger, our fear, our helplessness, hopelessness, can I become more Christ-like, Buddha-like, Krishna-like, Elohim-like, Allah-like, which means that I have to do, doesn't matter what my background, what my religion or lack of religion, some spiritual practices to transform the ego from a commanding master into a personal assistant, to purify and open my heart. So I'm asking you to say something about the critical need for spiritual practices. In fact, we wrote a book about that, the third book, Finding Peace Through Spiritual Practices.
Right.
So
Thank you,
can you say
Jamal.
something about that, Brother Don?
I think we have, the four of us have said to each other in so many different ways that without the foundation of opening the heart through spiritual practices, that is, opening the heart to the lives of other people and to God, to that power greater than we, even if we are yearning for all the things that should happen on the planet, we're not going to have the strength and the courage to really stay with it. And that's why faith communities are so important, because they're designed to help us through corporate spiritual practice have the strength and the wisdom and the courage to go out and do things toward justice and so forth. But individual spiritual practices are the things that keep us going between moments of corporate worship. And they have to be done daily, even if just 5 minutes, to take us out of our egocentrism. And I'm not saying that egocentrism is bad, because we have to manage our lives, but we have to be released from that from time to time, to be reminded, as you say, to develop that awareness that we're not the only people on the planet. The universe does not revolve around us, that in fact we're here to help with something. And without spiritual practices, I think we'll probably live our lives at a much more superficial level. And I think in some ways, the world is yearning for that right now, yearning for it. And I'm using the word yearning because I think it's the word, it means hope with a lot more energy even. And yet we don't know how to find it. And so meditation and prayer, and I mean prayer not in educating God about what we need, but in opening our hearts to the lives of other people. I think you can have meditation, which is kind of a personal practice, by which I mean meditating without necessarily trying to understand the larger reality of life. And that's not bad, because we all need to find our balance. But a spiritual practice is meditation in that larger context, trying to find our place on the planet, in the place of creation and so forth. And so we believe that it's just crucial, as you said. You know, I mean, the one verse that almost every Christian person knows is from Hebrew, the Bible, Psalm 23, or known popularly as the 23rd Psalm, which says we have everything we need. We have spiritual practices, green pastures, still waters, which restore our souls, it says. But it doesn't stop there. Then it says, we are led in paths of justice. We are led in paths of justice. And that's what it all leads to. And so I think that's what we keep coming back to, all of us, that I think that illustrates how important those practices are. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Don, I love the way that you talk about the kind of meditation and spiritual practice that is most meaningful for you, the kind that connects us with an existential openness, right? A sense that we're part of something so much larger. And that made me think of one of the really important ideas in the book, and that's the idea of a core teaching, right, about this kind of openness and reaching toward welcome and universality that's in every tradition. Could you
Mhm.
say a little bit about this idea of a core teaching and how you use it?
Yeah, thank you. You know, as you know, Laura, we started out meeting weekly. In fact, we met weekly for 20 years. And at the beginning, there was no agenda except to try to get to know each other better, with the hope that through doing that, we would be able to penetrate the barriers that have separated our traditions and find ways to cooperate. But along the way, we began talking about what we did call core teachings. And I think a core teaching in each of our traditions is something that is at the base. It's elemental, it's fundamental to the whole thing, and everything else kind of flows from it. And here's an example. I mean, as you know, we identify oneness in Judaism, unconditional love in Christianity, and compassion in Islam, even though all three are in all three traditions, but there's an area of emphasis for each of those. Someone once suggested that maybe in Christianity, radical hospitality would be the core teaching. And I said, well, no, I think radical hospitality flows from unconditional love. In other words, that I think, you know, there are experiences that are the consequence of core teachings. Now, obviously, these are our opinions. We don't mean to be dogmatic. I think we're trying to be invitational and say, what do you think? You know, what is at the absolute core of what you believe and so forth? Where does it come from, and what does it lead to? When people use the phrase core values, for example, we say that's different from core teaching. A core value is something like forgiveness, cooperation, reconciliation, justice flow from these core teachings. And I think it's a good exercise just to continually ask, what is it against which we measure everything else in each of our traditions? And as I said, we've come up with this. We think we're pretty close to the mark, but who knows? And so it's really more of an invitation to say to everybody, what do you think?
So, Brother Don, may I go on? Did you have a question, Sister Laura? Did you have an additional question?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment if we want to
Yeah.
stay on this thread just for another moment. I just finished reading this very little book by the Christian scholar of Hebrew Bible, Walter Brueggemann. Right. And I think it's called Chosen, Reading the Bible Amid the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. And he talks about how one of the central tensions in the Bible that comes up over and over and over again is the tension in the community described in the Bible between exclusivity and welcome, right? You've got a story where one leader, one community says everything's open and there are rules about welcome the stranger. And then you've got a time when a leader or the community says, no, 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 we don't want any strangers, no weird teachings, no this or that. Given that both are in the tradition, can you tell us why you see these values of compassion and love and welcome as the most important ones? Why do they call to you?
I think that, I mean, I think for me, I can't get any further down than those things. You know, I think they are the fount of everything else. And yet, as you suggest, nothing is unambiguous. I mean, these things come and go. Our awareness of them comes and goes, and our need to protect ourselves needs to find a balance with being open to the other. And all kinds of things are going on. I think Brueggemann is one of the best Christian thinkers on any topic, from my point of view. He's been a great benefit to theological reflection. But I think that what you've quoted from him is the reality that there just aren't any easy answers, and we're not the same from day to day. Some days we get up and say, "Hey, this is great." Some days we wake up and say, "I could just stay in bed," or something. I don't know what, but we have good days and bad days, and those are truths. I mean, those things are real, and everybody knows they're real, and so part of the invitation of Scripture, I think, is to read with that kind of an awareness that some of the stuff we read really tells us important things about the divine and about the relationship between the human and the divine. And some of it doesn't. Some of it just plain is trying to justify stuff that shouldn't be justified. And that's who we are as human beings. We do those things. In some ways, obviously we wish we didn't, but we do. And so to encourage everyone to read the Bible with that kind of critical thinking is such an important thing. I don't remember in Sunday school or even my own theological education where that was said quite that pointedly. And certainly, there was always an attempt to show the difference between reading the Bible literally or metaphorically. And I think there's a combination in there somehow, which has to be read with that kind of critical thinking, reflective thinking, and with an attention span that permits you to do that, because our attention spans are being totaled by social media and so forth. So I think what you've hit on, Laura, is a terrific description, rather, of one of the things that it means to be human.
Yeah. So, Brother Don, you mentioned human and the divine. We are personality, which is nothing more than a bundle of conditioned reactions to life circumstances. We are that, but we're also the divine spark. Christ nature, Buddha nature, Elohim nature. And I love the words of Rumi, who says, this is what life is about. Marry your soul. That wedding is the way. Align your personality every moment as best as you can, every day, every week, every month, closer and closer to your higher self. But what I want to ask you was, there's a core value also of justice in this, besides those core teachings. Can you talk, and you talk a lot about justice over the decades I've known you, Brother Don. Can you say a little bit more about the place, the role of justice in religion?
Well, I think justice is one of the reasons religions exist. That is the search for justice, the work for justice. Because we are not just much of the time. And yet, if we could be, we would be helping each other instead of hurting each other. And I think that's the short way to say it. You know, the awareness of the need for justice is so important. And yet, I think we three have agreed over the years that most of the time, much of the time in our lives, we're asleep to that because of so many other things that are happening in our lives and so many things that require our attention and draw us away from this kind of reflective thinking. And so I think it was on those occasions, Jamal, you may recall, in the old long time ago, we'd be preaching on the golden rule, you and Ted and I, and Ted would tell the story about Shammai and Hillel, and a guy goes to Shammai, who's a carpenter and a rabbi, and the guy said, "Tell me everything I need to know about Judaism," while standing on one foot. And Shammai takes his measuring rod and hits the guy over the head. Guy doesn't like that, so he goes to Hillel and gets the golden rule. And I think what we were trying to illustrate is that without being awake, the golden rule will not help you. And so much of what spiritual practices and communal worship and so forth is should be aimed toward is waking us up. The phrase in the Gospels, "wake, awake," comes several times. There's a great hymn in the Christian tradition, "Wake, awake, for night is flying. Watchers on the heights are crying, rejoice for Jerusalem." I mean, it's just so clear that there's an invitation to wake up from each of our traditions in so many different ways, so many interesting and hopeful ways, that's why we're doing what we're doing together.
Yes, yes. Just a very, very quick comment. I love the story of the Buddha who was asked many times, Buddha, what are you? Are you a saint? Are you a wizard? Are you a god? And he would simply say, I am awake. So we all need to awaken. And one quick verse from the Quran I wanted to say, which I love very much. In the Quran, there's a revelation which says, be just, be just. This is closest to being God conscious, closest to being God conscious. So with that, I give it over to you, Sister Laura.
Thanks. I just want to highlight for people who are on the webinar that our host Felipe has just noted that soon we'll have the opportunity to discuss questions that come from anyone who's attending. So if you want to post them in the chat, that would be great. And it could also be a comment if you haven't really had the time to formulate it as a question. But Don, I will say one more thing. It's kind of more of a comment, but hopefully you will regard it as a question and say something enlightening. I am struck in the way you present things, how much your worldview is a lot like Plato's worldview, Platonic worldview, right? That there are these big ideas and teachings and values and existential realities of justice and goodness and equality. And they're just there. And when you see them, they are so self-evident. But as you say, it's our awareness of them that just keeps changing. And the way you say in the book, not exactly here today, but I know this is what you think, that each religious tradition, at least part of it, is about helping us find our way to those realities, right? Taking away the blinders. And I'll just pause there, see if you have a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. That's I think you're right that I would just add that we try not to be dogmatic or even doctrinal, more by naming these things as invitations to think, to move toward cooperation and helping each other. I mean, I think in some ways, if I were to say, if someone said, what does the word home mean? I would say it's that place where we're going, where we would be able to help each other, where we would be reassured about our own beings, but at the same time would be in touch through awareness of the ability to help each other and so forth. And in that sense, I would say, as a pastor and a religious leader, we're all just trying to find our way home. And some of us are succeeding and some of us aren't. And that is so much the reality of what we're living in right now, and so much of what we don't understand about each other is how we're trying to find our way home, what that means for us as individuals and so forth. So I think, yeah, I think you nailed it.
So do we have
Thank you.
do we have time for another question, Sister Laura?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat that I will read, but if you have a question first, Jamal, please go.
Okay, very briefly, Brother Don, we have talked about these areas where the institution of religion goes astray, exclusivity, violence in our scriptures, unequal status of women, homophobia, apathy towards social injustice and planetary degradation. Just want to ask you, in the timeline of your life, when did you first become aware of where and how religion goes astray in these areas?
Thanks, Jamal. I mean, I can remember even as a little kid thinking Christianity can't be the only thing. It just did not make sense. And so I struggled with that, even though my family was active in a church and so forth. And when I got to college, I did not go to church. I'd had enough of that, and I found the opportunity to go to seminary was terrifying and wonderful simultaneously. And I think that what I have had in my being, although I didn't have words for it until recently, that the authoritarian structures that are the institutions that are the holders of our traditions get in the way of the wisdom. They just get in the way. And I don't know the answer to that one, except to say we have to monitor, consistently monitor how well our institutions are actually fulfilling their purposes. And so I think this is something that has been growing in me. I mean, living in Cairo and then in Lebanon helped to bring that forward too, because I experienced the worship life of other traditions and heard people speaking different languages and so forth. And I just think it's probably always been there, Jamal. Somehow it was in my DNA. And I'm both grateful for it, and it's been a struggle. Yeah.
Thank you, Brother Don. Just a quick comment. You mentioned monitor, and I I love the saying of the Sufis who say this is what the institution of religion suffers from. They call it deferred maintenance.
Yeah.
They're suffering from deferred maintenance.
Right.
Over to you, Sister Laura.
Thanks. There is a great question in the chat, a big question, but also a very practical question. So I'm going to read it to you, Don, and ask for your thoughts on it. How can we engage in discourse with others who are actively working to limit the rights of myself and others, especially with the idea that our values may be used against us in the current situation? Should we even engage with them, given their stated ideas and plans in society?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think that gets pretty close to the heart of the matter. I think we have to remember that everyone is a human being. Everyone is a human being and precious in the sight of God, and is as equally has equal access to the idea that the essential dignity of every human being should matter most, instead of money, coercive power, and everything. And so it's really, I think it's something to keep in mind as these things happen. And sometimes there is nothing more to say. We can't fight and we can't argue. Sometimes we have to say, I honor you as a human being, but I don't think we're at a place right now where we can talk. And if we were to get to that place, it would be based on that willingness to be open, to go beyond the obvious, to listen to the stories of another human being, and realize how rich our lives really are, and how limited are our abilities to experience that, which I think is part of what's underneath the problem the question describes.
Beautiful. May I make a comment, Sister Laura?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Brother Don, I love your answer, because the same question was asked of a wonderful mystic in India, Kabir, I think 15th, 16th century mystic. What do you do when you meet an adversary whose values they go against humanity? He said, protect yourself. Don't allow yourself to be abused. Take the right action. But as you take the right action, I beg you, I implore you, know that you're angry at this person's behavior, not at that person's being. And just as you take the right action, keep this discernment in your mind and heart between behavior and being. And keeping that discernment in my mind and heart, he said, has the power to shift heaven and earth. But the difference is, the discernment I have to make is, I'm angry at this person's behavior, not that person's being, which is Christ-like, Buddha-like, Elohim-like. And that attitude in me as I take the right action will make a difference vibrationally.
Jamal, that is so true. And I've heard you say that so many times over the last 20 some years. And I have, it's on my hard drive. I really appreciate that. Distinguishing between being and action is what we don't do. And partly because we don't know how, partly because we're so consumed by other things, especially these days. Partly because, as you have so often said, it's inconvenient, and yet it's essential. It's essential, and that's why the three of us feel that interfaith understanding,
Right,
not just dialogue, but understanding, leading to action and cooperation,
right,
is so important, not just to finding ways to help us help each other, but to the future of the planet we're sitting on right now, which is in peril. And things are changing so quickly, and the weather's changing. You just had an event on the West Coast that was pretty scary, as I understand it.
yes, yes.
And so, yeah, thank you, Kabir. Thank you, Jamal. Yeah.
And so critical to get to know the other. See, that's it. But it's easy to say, but very difficult to implement. That requires sincerity, humility, and persistence. And that eventually will create that connection. That wonderful saying, only that which comes from the heart can open another heart, which is locked.
Yeah, that's good. You know, I
Yeah.
think too of when in the Gospels, someone asked Jesus what needs to be done to receive eternal life, and that Jesus says, quotes the Shema, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And another one is like it. He says, Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself. And then the questioner says the key question: who is my neighbor? And Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan, and then says to the questioner, which of these people was one who showed mercy, and or, which of these people was neighbor to the one who was injured? And he says, the person says, the one who showed mercy. And he said, go and do likewise. And I think that's an example of understanding the difference between being and behavior. And it's just so important.
Yeah, thank you both for these reflections. I wonder if I could offer a brief reflection on this question that was asked as well.
Yeah.
Of course.
I think that there are times when it is best not to engage. For example, during high holiday services, we had someone, a Christian nationalist type person, who came to one of our services, tried to disrupt it, and looked for the most vulnerable person in the room, that is somebody who was crying because they were moved by what was going on in the ritual, and tried to convert them. And honestly, I didn't even think about it, but I sort of snapped into a mother bear kind of protective mode and told the person several times that they were crossing a line, and we did not want them to do this or this, and that they needed to leave. Because in that moment, they were so determined to be doing one particular thing, right? And they were determined to do it in a way that didn't allow us to do our particular thing, that any dialogue in that moment would have been simply prolonging them doing what they came to do. However, if I met that person in different circumstances, and I say that this if because there are people in my family and professional circle and friendship circle and neighborhood who are quite different from me and opposed to many of the things I stand for, what I would do in a different situation with even someone opposed to me is I might talk about family. I might talk about the weather. I might talk about nature. I might talk about animals. And we would establish the foundation for a relationship. Now, that might not change where they stand theologically and politically, and it might not change where I stand, but it does likely mean, right, that when things are very difficult and we're in emergency situations, we may well pause and act on behalf of each other rather than an ideology or an emotional wave. So I think it's a really great question, and it can't be answered in a one response for all time kind of answer.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I'll stop there. And Don, if you want to say something very quick in closing, we'll turn it over to Felipe.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. And you're so right. And so I'm grateful to you and to Jamal for keeping me on my toes and for helping me to think and be the person I would like to be, and for giving us, the three of us, the chance to share this stuff with people on the online today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Don, for just going so deep right away. No small talk. Let's get to the heart.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Interfaith Amigos, for joining us on this incredible webinar. I'm so grateful for the conversation, for the insights, and for the question that was asked. I feel like religion in so many ways has been weaponized since the beginning of, humanity. And so to be able to see this point of view from three different Abrahamic religions is really important. So thank you so much for that. For everybody else that is watching, I would like to take the time really quickly to let you know about some things that are happening with the Charter for Compassion for the rest of the year. So we have our Charter Sangha, our time to meditate, be together, share space, and even silence. It's every last Saturday of the month, in this case, November 30th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. All the different links can be found. Let me just post it right here on the chat. You have right there all the different events on that link. Next, we have our course Dealing with Anxiety with Dr. Rick Hansen. This begins on December 2nd. This is the second time that has been taught, and it's a really great course. A lot of people have loved it, so strongly recommend. Our next school we'll read is Awakening Wholeness with author and charter board member Arun Waklu. And this is going to be on December 4th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. The Global Music Harmony of Humanity is every Wednesday. This is a webinar that Marilyn, our executive director, does, where she shares different clips of music and talks about the commonality of humanity through it all, which is very, very interesting and very, very fun to be part of. We have our global read for kids and company. So this is obviously, as you say, read kids and company. Magic happens in the unscrambled box. And this is going to be on December 7th at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time with the authors Lisa Jennings, Gaynor Splutoni, and Melissa Carter. Last but not least, you can join our community by attending different chats like on Love, Hope, and Compassion webinar series. That's going to be on December 3rd at 8:30 Pacific. Allies in Action, the UK chat specifically for people in the UK. So if you're part of a compassionate community, a partner organization, or you have signed the charter and you would like to know more about what we're doing, this is the time to go and talk to us as staff and volunteers. We also have a social justice partner meeting on December 13th. And the EdNet forum is going to be on Compassion in Action by ProSocial on December 19th. And last but not least, our healthcare sector kitchen table chat is the first Friday of the month, so December 6th at 8:30 a.m. Pacific. And we close the year with our last Sangha on December 28th at 9 a.m. Pacific. My friends, thank you so much for joining us once again. This has been a true pleasure and such a joy to be able to hear again from your opinions and your deep conversations. Remember, everyone, that this will be recorded. This has been recorded, and we'll be putting it on our YouTube channel as soon as we finish this. So you'll be waiting for that email that will be coming. Once again, thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you in the next opportunity.
Thank
Hey,
you,
everyone.
Felipe.
Yes, God bless. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.